pay for the pigsty so we don't have to kill each other just to get something to eat. It's not wrong.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means.
Slaves are mine. Lives are mine. All that they own, mine. I do not know your God.
We are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness. It does not serve the world. It's about shrinking. We were all meant to shine. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same, as we are liberated from our own fear.
In one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight.
I just want you to know that I won't let you down.
Well, good evening, audience. You are on the cutting edge, and I am your host, Daniel Holdings, and where we are splitting darkness from light. We have a very, very important show for you this evening, one that I think has been months, if not years, in the making for me personally, and I can tell you that I am very excited about it. But let's get the opinion of somebody that really counts. Dorothy, are you there?
Yes, Daniel, I'm here. And I know we've discussed this before, but this economy thing really, really annoys me on a personal level. Because, math is math, and they're messing with math. It's just not right. Some things are not done.
Audience, for those of you who may not know, Dorothy is our producer. This show is made possible through her efforts, as well as the Portal channel and other shows on this channel. And Dorothy actually used to be a CPA or an accountant, so she knows math. But when it comes to the economy, like most people, Dorothy, the economy is a little different. The financial industry is a little different. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. Sometimes it's 1 + 1 = 5 if you ask the federal government. And so your frustration, I think, is the same frustration that most people have. And the problem is that people do not understand that things in the financial world don't operate like everybody else. They just don't. So, audience, this show is the title of this show today is called The Babylonian Financial System, This Side of the Veil. And if you recall, we have been doing a series of shows on the veil. Mr. Steve Quayle helped us kick that off a few months ago, way back in October. We just carried on with that same thing, exploring, I should say, all the things that go into the veil, this veil that separates the supernatural realm or this other extra dimensions from our realm. And it's not so much hocus pocus and super spiritual. There are physical laws or physics that actually go into this discussion. And if you recall last week, we had Big Brain himself, Stan Day, on the line with us with Watchman Larry Taylor and Augusto Perez, and we were talking about the physics and the mechanics of the veil. Well, this particular show, the Babylonian Financial System, This Side of the Veil, is a much more pragmatic discussion than those discussions previously, because we're going to delve into where we are with this upcoming financial collapse. Is there going to be a financial collapse? Is there really a problem, or is this made up from conspiracy theorists like me? So we are going to get into all of that, Dorothy, and hopefully some of your questions will be answered and some of your fears allayed as we put our trust in the Lord as opposed to the almighty dollar. But before we get to that, I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you folks about something that I think is important, and it's called muscle memory. Now, you're sitting there going, what the heck is he talking about? We were just talking about financials or the financial industry. We were talking about the economy and science, and all of a sudden he's talking about muscle memory. Now, bear with me, folks, because this is pertinent and it's important. I want you to think about something. Guys that study the martial arts, and I took a little bit, so I know this, they routinely do the same exercise over and over and over. They do the same punch. They do the same kick. Somebody tries to grab them in the same way, and they do it over and over and over. And likewise, you see other professional athletes, that's what they do. They do the same exercise over and over and over. So you have to ask yourself, why do they do that? Why is it that they would take so much time to do something over and over and over again? You think they would have got it right the first or second time. Well, that's not really the point. The point is that when they do that, they are trying to develop muscle memory. It's not so much your mental memory that you have to worry about in a sudden situation. It is muscle memory. And the idea is that when they get in all of a sudden to a serious situation, in the case of martial artist, if he finds himself in a fight, he's not going to have to think about how to kick. He's not going to have to think about how to punch. He's not going to have to think about how to move. His muscles will remember it automatically, and he'll do what's needed to survive that battle. Likewise, sportsmen, professional athletes, they do the same thing, that they don't have to think. When a running back is going through the line of the defensive line of the opposing team, he's not thinking about cutting or ducking or putting his shoulder down. He is doing it because he's done it over and over and over again. Now, what does this have to do with you? What does this have to do with the financial system? What does this have to do with where we are in time? Because I have told you, audience, that the Lord told me a couple of years ago that time was at an end. And you've heard me say again and again and again that I believe that we are at the end of the age. And all of these things are coming upon the earth because we are at the end of the age. It's time. So what does muscle memory have to do with where we are in time? It is simply this. We are about to face in 2014 some of the most significant situations in all of human history. And there are many people that have taken the time to prep. They've taken the effort. They've spent the money to prep. And I think that's a wonderful thing. However, if you do not have spiritual muscle memory, all of it will be for naught. Because the Bible says, Jesus said that those times would come upon them suddenly. He goes about and he says that two will be in the field, one will be taken, one will be not. And I'm not talking necessarily about the rapture. I'm talking about a sudden event. He says that, when it happens, don't go in to get your cloak. Because you're not going to, basically he's saying you're not going to have time. You have to react. You have to do what you already know to do and move forward. Because when disaster strikes or when a serious event strikes, you have to react. You don't have time to think through things. That's why people tell you have a go bag and all the rest, which is all good advice. But I'm telling you that unless you are spiritually in the place where you have spiritual muscle memory, you will be caught unaware, or you will freeze in the face of disaster. Now, I remember a movie that I saw not too recently, and I forget the name of the movie. I think it was something like The Wonder or something like that. It was about the tsunami that hit in the South Pacific. Now, in there was a family that was vacationing, and they were at, some of them, they had little kids, they were in the pool. Another lady the mother was reading her book, and all of a sudden, there was a little warning that something was happening beyond the trees, and all of a sudden, this huge tidal wave was upon them, and they couldn't react. They were swept away by that tidal wave. The point is that when events begin to roll downhill, and we are caught in the middle of those events, that is not the time to think about the next thing you're supposed to do. You need to be able to react. You need to be able to react spiritually, and you need to be able to react physically. And that is one of the reasons why we have our very special guest on the show today, V, because he is going to show you why things will catch you unawares if you are not prepared. And so that's why this show has been years in the making, and I dare say months in the making, because, from the first time I heard him with Steve Quayle, I thought this was a man that I needed to have a conversation for your benefit, audience, and sure enough, we are about to do that. But before we do that, there's something, we're going to hear him on the other side of the break, but I want you to pay close attention to what we are about to play. This is Judge Napolitano, and he's doing a monologue called What If? Now, you need to understand that I don't agree with everything he says, but he gets most of what he says right. And you need to understand, audience, where we are today in time, because if he is correct, things are about to get very, very serious. So please, pay close attention to Judge Napolitano and What If?
Does the government work for us, or do we work for the government? Tonight, what if the Constitution no longer applied? What if the whole purpose of the Constitution was to limit the government? What if Congress's enumerated powers in the Constitution no longer limited Congress, but were actually used as a justification to extend Congress's authority over every realm of human life? What if the president, meant to be an equal to Congress, has instead become a democratically elected, term-limited monarch? What if the president assumed that everything he did was legal just because he's the president? What if he could interrupt your regularly scheduled radio and TV programming for a special message from him? What if he could declare war on his own? What if he could read your emails and your texts without a search warrant? What if he could kill you without warning? What if Supreme Court justices no longer looked to the Constitution to determine the constitutionality of a law, but rather simply to what justices who preceded them thought about it? What if the rights and principles guaranteed in the Constitution have been so distorted in the past 200 years as to be unrecognizable by the founders? What if the 50 states were no longer sovereign entities, equals to each other, and parents of the federal government they voluntarily constituted? What if the states were mere provinces of a totally nationalized and fully centralized government? What if the Constitution was amended stealthily, not by constitutional amendments duly ratified by the states, but by the constant and persistent expansion of the federal government's role in our lives? What if the federal government decided if its own powers were proper and constitutional? What if the Constitution were no longer the supreme law of the land? What if you needed a license from the government to speak, to assemble, or to protest against the government? What if the government didn't like what you planned to say, and so it didn't give you the license? What if the right to keep and bear arms only applied to the government? What if posse comitatus, the federal law that prohibits our military from occupying our streets, were no longer in effect? What if the government considered the military an adequate dispenser of domestic law enforcement? What if cops looked and acted like troops and you couldn't distinguish the military from the police? What if you were not secure in your person, in your papers, and in your property? What if federal agents could write their own search warrants in defiance of the Constitution? What if the government could decide when you were and were not entitled to a jury trial? What if the government could take your property whenever it wanted? What if the government could continue prosecuting you until it got the verdict it wanted? What if the government could force you to testify against yourself simply by labeling you a domestic terrorist? What if the government could torture you until you said what the government wanted to hear? What if people running for president actually supported torture? What if the government tortured your children to get to you? What if government judges and government lawyers intimidated juries into convicting the innocent? What if the government could send you to your death and your innocence meant nothing so long as the government's procedures were followed? What if America's prison population, the largest in the world, was a cruel and unusual way for a country to be free? What if half the prison population never harmed anyone but themselves? What if the people had no rights except those the government chose to let them have? What if the states had no rights except to do as the federal government commanded? What if our elected officials didn't really live among us, but instead all had their hearts and homes in Washington, D.C.? What if the government could strip you of your rights because of where your mother was when you were born? What if the income tax was unconstitutional? What if the states were convinced to give up their representation in Congress? What if the government tried to ban you from using a substance in your body that is older than the government itself? What if voting didn't mean anything anymore because both political parties stand for big government? What if the government could write any law, regulate any behavior, and tax any event? The Constitution be damned. What if the government was the reason we don't have a Constitution anymore? What if you could love your country but hate what the government has done to it? What if sometimes to love your country you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if I'm right? What if the government is wrong? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now? Now, as I said, I don't necessarily agree with everything Judge Napolitano said. However, the peril that our country and our monetary system faces is something that has never happened before in the history of this country or our financial system. Audience, you are listening to The Cutting Edge. I'm your host, Daniel Holdings. We are splitting darkness from light on a very special show this Tuesday evening. We are talking about the Babylonian financial system this side of the veil. And to help me do that is a very special guest, a man who is in what we used to say is in the know. He was an analyst for the Royal Bank of Scotland. And for those of you that understand the banking industry, London and banks in London are the mecca for the banking industry. So this man was actually in the heart of all the ongoings in the banking industry at one time. And he has maintained those contacts throughout his career and continued to follow the financial news. It is amazing the accuracy that he has in predicting events with an ongoing financial collapse. And it is my pleasure to welcome the Guerrilla Economist, V. V, are you with us?
Yeah, it's great to be on board, and it's great to be with you to go ahead and not only just split this darkness, but absolutely annihilate it, rip it apart, tear it to pieces, and expose the whole apparatus for what it truly is, my friend, and that is slavery incorporated. It's great to be on board.
Well, thank you, V. Thanks for being here. And audience, you need to understand something. Just before, and I can always tell you, audience, that it's going to be a good show when we have technical difficulties, because the enemy doesn't want you to know what is going on, and so things happen behind the scenes, and we try to keep them from you because it's good radio to move forward. But you need to understand that we are fighting a battle here. There are intercessors praying in the background, and I ask you, intercessors, as you hear my voice, that you would dig in and that you would pray, because what we are about to discuss, the enemy doesn't want to get out, because I'm telling you, it is a battle right now. But V, thank you so much for being with us. Buddy, there's I got on your website, and we'll give it a plug here in a minute, but roguemoney.net, and there's a quote on your website, and it talks about do you know which quote I'm talking about? It's like your slogan.
Yes, the Josiah Stamp quote. Banking was born in iniquity and conceived in sin.
Banking was born in iniquity and conceived in sin. Now, what do you mean by that? Why is that you guys' mantra? Why that quote?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked that. Oftentimes people wonder why I have the double-headed eagle. on the website. They think I'm some sort of illuminist or Luciferian. It's not. It's me rubbing that symbology in their face, and hence the word rogue money, because I have gone rogue. And our slogan is banking is conceived in iniquity and born in sin, is simply this. When you understand banking structure, when you understand the system, this system is not designed to profit and prosper individuals. This is designed to enslave and impoverish you. And only those with a very dark and demented mind could conceive of such heinous evil as to bring this monstrosity onto the world stage and make the masses accept it as if it was normal. And that, my friend, is why it was conceived in iniquity and born in sin.
Wow, audience, V and I hadn't talked before. When I titled the show the Babylonian financial system, this side of the veil, I had no idea he was going to say the things that he said. But V, I think tonight's show is appropriately titled, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you titled it that way, where it's just not going to be about the normal economics. It's not going to be about equity positions and assets and commodities and what the Dow Jones is doing. What I really want to do is take it deep and expose the spiritual elements of this, and make the people understand that what you have here is something that's beyond human. What you have here is the beast system, lurking always in the background, and it has been growing stronger and stronger with every year that falls off the calendar.
Wow. V, oftentimes in audience, I was in the financial industry for a good while, and I hope to be able to bring a discussion to the table for you where some of these things that the industry often talks about kind of fall on deaf ears because the public at large doesn't understand the reason for them. There's this, it's funny because those that are in the industry, they tend to talk a little different than everybody else, and they're happy with keeping everybody else in the dark. Is that right?
Sure. Absolutely. See, what these cadre of individuals like to do, Dan, is that they like to make people feel that this is some sort of a black art, that only those of the initiated few are able to decipher the things of the market. So they make the market seem to be this mystical nexus that God knows where it can go and no one could predict it. But I remember back before the tech bubble, people were like, "Oh, the market is an animal." That was the mantra that was constantly put out there. "Oh, we don't know what the market's going to do. It's like a wild animal." And I tend to laugh and chuckle, and I would always say, "Yeah, you're right. It is an animal, but it's a circus animal. It's controlled."
That's a good analogy. So,
and once you get past,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, once you get past all the fancy jargon, it's really simple.
It is really, really simple. And one of the things I try to do for my clients, that I was always trying to break it down so that they could understand it, because it's not some mystical, magical thing. You don't have to have some PhD to figure it out. It's pretty basic stuff, but the stuff that you're going to bring to the table is even deeper than that, because you're going to talk about the motives behind the things that they do, and that is something that the audience absolutely needs to hear. But before we get there, let's go ahead and build a foundation for them. Now, audience, I know that many of you are listening, and you might be in the chat room tonight. I encourage you, Dorothy, our producer, is monitoring the chat room, so I encourage you to ask questions of V through that chat room. We're not going to take questions because we want to keep our minds and our plates clear so that we can discuss those things that the Lord has brought out. However, we do want to hear what you have to say, and so I encourage you to ask questions via the chat room, and Dorothy will relay them to me, and I will ask them of V for you. Now, there's so many little tidbits here, V, about things that we need to clear up to make sure that people understand what we were talking about. So let's just talk about the dollar right now. Okay.
Sure.
Now, is it my understanding that the dollar is not backed by anything, and that it is a fiat currency? And if that's true, what gives the dollar value, and what is a fiat currency?
Sure, great question. The dollar, first and foremost, is folks. What I want to make clear is this: there is a very sharp and distinct difference between currency and money. And later on in the program, I'll get into the differences. But it's very important that you understand the two. And oftentimes, those that are in power love to use fancy words and legalese and all these different types of jargons in order to confuse you and confound you. Okay? Now, when Daniel said that the dollar is a fiat currency, fiat simply means edict, by decree. Okay, meaning it is a worthless paper that's backed up by nothing, but it has value because I declare it to be valuable. And since I am the biggest, strongest nation in the world and quote-unquote a superpower, it has value. Thus, you can use my fiat currency as a reserve currency, and that's what you have on the world stage. It's on all reality, just like every single fiat currency in the world, whether it be the dollar, the euro, the rupee, the yuan, the pound, whatever is out there, aside from the commodity-backed ones, it's just fiat. It's just valuable via edict, because I say so, and that's simply basically what a fiat currency is.
And so that concept is closely tied to this phrase. I mean, you hear this phrase all the time, and people's eyes kind of wax over when they hear it because they don't understand it. This phrase called confidence, right?
Sure.
Can you briefly explain this idea of confidence in the dollar? When you hear people talk about confidence in the dollar, help people understand what they're really talking about.
Just like it comes down to any ware or product produced by a company, if there's confidence in that company, you know they're going to put out a good product. The dollar is the same thing. It is people have confidence in the dollar, and that confidence is what allows it to have that preeminence on the world stage. So people feel good about it. So if I wanted to take my dollars and fly over to, I don't know, let's just say to India or something like that, I am confident to know that my currency, the dollar, will be accepted anywhere in the world because people are confident about the dollar. And they have been. For a very long time, we used to say the dollar is as good as gold. But that's starting to change.
Well, speaking of the dollar being as good as gold, now, did I hear you correctly that there is no commodity, if you will, gold, silver, platinum, whatever the case may be, that backs the dollar? Is that right?
100%. There's nothing backing the dollar but confidence, quote unquote.
Okay. So if there's nothing backing the dollar, there's this phrase that you hear from time to time. Actually, the public doesn't hear this. The public doesn't really know this, but there is this idea that we are on a fractional reserve system. That's one of those mystical terms, right? Explain to the audience what a fractional reserve system is, very briefly, and why we're under it.
Sure. Fractional reserve systems are great, especially if you're a high-level con artist. If you're a con man looking to swindle as many people as you possibly can, or someone who's involved in a Ponzi scheme, you want a fractional reserve type system. And the way that it works, each Western country has its own level of quote-unquote fractional reserve. In the UK, what they've had is unlimited, okay? But in the U.S., the fractional reserve is 9 times. Now, you might ask yourself, what the heck do you mean 9 times? Well, it's simple. If I put $1,000 into my bank, that bank takes my $1,000 and loans it out 9 times. So they leverage it over 9 times. The bank makes money on the interest rates and the fees attached. They make their money and they're fine, so long as the 9 people that they loaned they're fine, so long as I don't come back and immediately withdraw my $1,000. Then there's a problem. You have a run on the bank at that point. And that's the idea with fractional reserve lending, is to leverage out and dish out as many loans as possible with very little reserve, okay? In the hopes that all the people that are out there with money do not come back to the bank on the same day and pull all their money out. Then you have a bank run. That's what basically fractional reserve is all about.
So the idea of a reserve or a pool of money at a bank is literally a fraction of what the bank has actually lent out. Then is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Is the money. So ideally, okay, you mentioned this phrase, and people hear this all the time, and people, that we try to talk about a bank run. The day that they try to draw money out of their bank, and Steve Quayle's good for this. He tries to tell people about the day that they try to draw money out of the bank, and the banks are closed, and you can't get your money out. That's essentially a bank run.
Right.
Why? But wait a minute, it's my money. How can they do that? V. How can they do that?
Great question. Well, simple. The rules of banking, okay, has changed, and now we're in a phase where you're no longer a depositor, but you're an unsecured lender. Meaning, as soon as you put your money in the bank, it's no longer yours. It's the bank's. And they can do with it as they please.
Wait a minute. That kind of sounds like thievery. I mean, when did that change? I mean, I've had a bank account my whole life, and all of a sudden you're telling me that the money that I put in the bank's not mine? I don't ever remember hearing about that.
No, you're absolutely correct. Those laws have been changed with the FDIC a couple of years ago. And now that money that you put in there, because you're an unsecured lender, if they lose it, the bank goes out of business, the bank goes bust, the fine letters state that they can pay you back anywhere between 0 to 99 years. Now, excuse me, I have to get a drink of water. I apologize.
Sure.
Out of nowhere, my throat's closing up. Hold on.
That's okay. That's all right. They always say that a good interviewer only asks questions that he knows that he knows the answer to. So that's what I'm trying to do with V, because oftentimes I would get these questions from people, and they were clueless as to what was really going on. So what we're trying to do because what I really want V to do is I want him to use his knowledge and his insight and his background to be able to take us to where we are now, what's happening now. Because if you're waiting for some financial collapse to happen tomorrow, you are sadly mistaken, because the financial collapse, as you've heard so many times from so many different pundits, at least that are on alternative radio, the financial collapse is happening now. It's happening before your eyes. And unless you understand these terms and how the banking industry works, you're going to get swept up in that tidal wave that I talked about in the monologue. So it's really, really important that you grasp these concepts, and that's the reason for these basic questions. Usually when V gets on the radio with Steve Quayle, they just run, they go. And although I can keep up with them, I'm sure a lot of people are sitting back going, what are they talking about? So that's the reason for this basic discussion. Hopefully we can get to some of the more complex questions in here in just a minute.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Okay, great.
I'm back. Sorry about that. Out of nowhere, my throat started closing up on me.
That's all right. That's all right. So we were talking about the fractional reserve system. Let me ask you this question, okay? Who's in charge of the Federal Reserve? I mean, what department in the government's in charge of the Federal Reserve?
The Federal Reserve is about as federal as Federal Express. It's about as federal as Bob's Tool Shop down the street from your house. That's about as federal the Federal Reserve is. In terms of who owns the Fed, there are member banks that are involved, but the actual voting board who selects these, that's all secretive. Their books have never been audited. I think Alan Greenspan in one of the interviews with on Meet the Press, this was about I think 10 or 12 years ago with Tim Russert. Greenspan said it best. Tim Russert asked him a question, well, what's the relationship between a Federal Reserve chairman and the President of the United States? And Greenspan looked the man dead in the eye and said, there is no relationship. We're the Federal Reserve. We don't care who the president is. It has no effect on us. So that just goes to show you the level of power that the Fed has. And, there's that famous quote by Mayor de Amschel Rothschild, who says, give me the power to print a nation's currency, and I care not who makes its laws. Folks, the power to create credit, the power to print money by a private cabal is the ultimate power. Because not only do they have that power where they can issue credit and create the money supply, but they have the power of taxation. And we all have heard that phrase, the power to tax is the power to destroy. So for the last, I'd say pretty much the entire 200-some-odd year history of the United States, it's always been a battle against the banksters from day one.
Well, so it begs the question, okay? Greenspan said there's no relationship between the president and the Federal Reserve, but there is a relationship between the Federal Reserve and the federal government per se, or the. Let me ask you this. Let's go back to asking basic questions so people can get this. We use this phrase. You hear this phrase all the time, and I hear this all the time. And I talk to people about a coming financial collapse, and people will say, well, they'll just print more money. There won't be a collapse. They'll just print more money, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So let's break this down for people. Okay. What is the function of the Federal Reserve when the government needs more money? What is the process? Very quickly, how does that work?
Sure. The government needs $3 trillion by tomorrow. The Fed just prints it for them. And in today's modern age, it's just a bunch of ones and zeros on a computer screen. So they just loan them the money on interest. It's unbelievable.
They loan them the money on interest. And what is the interest instrument that they are using normally?
The interest will be the T-bills.
It's T-bills. So what the government does, what our government does, it creates a debt instrument, right?
Correct.
You know what? You explain this better than me. So how is it? So the Federal Reserve just prints up money, right? And our Treasury Department needs money, right? So what's the Treasury Department? They say, hey, we need 3T by tomorrow, right? So what happens? What happens at that moment?
Well, they give it over to the, they hand it over to the Treasury. The Treasury pumps out a whole bunch of T-bonds. It's sold, and we buy it back, and it's a whole vicious cycle. So this
we're
whole
not buying
chain.
It back, are we? But it's not.
No, we're not buying it back. Right, and that's why 100% of your, foreign sovereign nations, they're the biggest holders of American debt.
So when people say that we don't have anything to worry about China, right, because we buy their junk, that's not necessarily true, is it?
Not at all. One of the biggest misconceptions that I deal with these days is when people tell me, well, V, China needs us because we buy their junk. You could not be more wrong. China doesn't need us. And the reality is, when you look at when I ask people all the time, what's the biggest sector in the Chinese economy? And people tell me, oh, it's manufacturing because they make, this much. They make more concrete than the next 20 countries combined, and more steel than the next 30 countries combined. And I look at them and I said, you're totally wrong. The biggest sector in the Chinese economy today is their banking sector. It's bigger than ours.
So what happens, because look, audience, let's break this down to your own lives. If you go to the bank, okay, let's try and make this really simple for people so they get this, right? Because again, it's one of these things where the, people think this is like some really strange, mystical thing in the banking industry that happens and money, just comes on trees. But it's not really the way it works. But so let's break it down to like a regular bank, okay? Now look, let's just say that my net worth, right, is probably, let's say my net worth is minus $1.5 million. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now notice, audience, I said minus, right? Let's say that I am in debt up to my eyeballs, $1.5 million, right?
Right.
So I go to the bank and I say to them, okay, Mr. Bank, okay, Mr. Bankman, I need money to pay my debt, right? I need to pay off $1.5 million, so I need some money, right? Now, typically, what he would say, well, what are your assets? And I would say, well, here's my asset. And he says, okay, well, you're minus $1.5 million. If you or I went to the bank, well, maybe you could, but I couldn't, and we said, look, give me $1.5 million, and I was in debt $1.5 million, they would laugh me out of the bank, right?
Right.
But yet, isn't that what's happening with our own government? Isn't that what's happening?
Absolutely. If you were to go to the bank, Daniel, and your debt to income is above 60%, nobody's going to give you a loan. They won't give you a loan. They won't even give you a $10,000 home improvement loan. They'll tell you to go take a hike. Then you have to go see one of these loan sharks at the corner, check cashing places. I'll give you a $5,000 loan with a 40% interest charge tacked on it. But that's synonymous with government. We've been on a spending spree, and the only thing that America has is paper and bombs. If we can't fix something by throwing paper at it, we bomb it. That's the way it works. But even that option is coming to an end. And our debt today, our debt to GDP, our nation's debt to income, it's not 60%. It's closer to 400%. It's astronomical. So again, go ahead.
It begs the question, though. How can we get away with that? Why do we keep doing this? How can we keep doing this?
We do this because the vast majority of people have their heads in the sand. The vast majority of people, we have a very laissez-faire attitude when it comes to the nation's politics, especially its economics. We leave it for somebody else. Think about it. Most Americans do not plan for retirement. What do? They go see some financial mumbo-jumbo wizard and tell them, here, manage my portfolio. I don't want to look at it. I'll look at it once a week, once a month, once a year. Tell me if I'm up or down. That's all good. They don't care because we live in an instant gratification society where we don't like dealing with truth. And the reason why we don't like dealing with financial truth is because financial truth requires responsibility, and that's something people don't want to do. So we leave it up to these brainiacs who are basically steering us right off the cliff, and that's the biggest problem. And you see the outcome of this. It goes from a very local level, from a person's house where, the father is supposed to sit there and the mother is supposed to sit there, the husband and wife, and go and balance the checkbook together, keep an eye on the bank statements, see what's in the bank, plan for retirement, college funds, this and that stuff. But we're not really paying attention on a national level. What's going on? Because we think somebody else will fix it. And these guys who are supposed to fix it are making it worse. And now we're at the precipice. Now it's not a question of if, it's just when we go bust.
Well, I made a statement that we that we are in the process of a financial collapse. It's going to happen in the future. we are seeing it before our eyes. Would you agree
absolutely.
With that?
Absolutely. You know, people ask me all the time, well, where's the collapse? I usually say, look around you. Look around you. Look at the latest jobs report, folks. Okay? I mean, here's the Obaminator coming out saying, unemployment's down 6.7%. Meanwhile,
and yet there's
92
like 90 million people, 90 million people not even in the workforce.
Not even in the workforce. And that's not even counting all the people that are working part-time jobs. Okay, you have 52 million on food stamps, 92 million out of the workforce, 101 million on some sort of welfare, another 90 million on some sort of a government handout or assistance like Medicare or something like that. And in other words, 52% of the country is not working, Daniel. 52%. And the real unemployment rate by every firm that tracks this is 30%. That's the real unemployment rate.
Unbelievable.
It's been 23 to 24% all of 2013.
You hear about Greece right now, unemployment in Greece. Sure. What's the unemployment rate in Greece? Do you remember?
The official number is about anywhere between 25 to 27%.
So
for
wait a minute. You're saying that we are on par. You're saying that we are on par with Greece.
No, we're beyond Greece. You see, that 24 to 27% is college-age kids that are, that are right out of college and looking for a job, they can't find it. And then the official unemployment number, I believe it's about 12 to 14%. So we're gone above that. So these guys have to use accounting gimmicks, okay, in order to torque and constrain and twist the numbers to fit their erroneous data. And then they put it out there and be like, hey, look, unemployment's down. Meanwhile, 92 million are out of the workforce. It's insane. Oh, there's no inflation. It's only 2%. Meanwhile, real inflation is about 9.7. It's insanity.
Well, what bothers me, brother, is we take it. We take it. Not you and I, but we, the public, take it. Whatever they say, we'll take. Right? When they're lying through their teeth, and they know it, because if I can figure it out, and I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree, then everybody could figure it out if they really stop to pay attention. But it's funny. I don't know if you heard that opening monologue by Judge Napolitano, and he says a lot
absolutely.
in that I don't agree with, because for one, audience, you need to know I'm not calling for insurrection. That's not what I'm calling for. And you get that feeling when you hear that. But he's right about more things than he's wrong about. And when he talks about that the greatest threat to the Union is now, he's absolutely right, and on so many levels. Now, he's talking about politics. We're talking about the financial industry. And audience, if you don't understand that we are in the midst of a financial collapse, then you're going to get swept away by that tsunami that I talked about at the beginning. And so you're listening to The Cutting Edge, and I'm your host, Daniel Holdings, with my very special guest, V, the Guerrilla Economist, well-known throughout alternative media. Do me a favor, V. We have about 11 minutes before the top of the hour break, but can you get out your website and any other pertinent information? People can get a hold of you, the kind of things that you do, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. The website is roguemoney.net. It's a membership-only website. The good news is it's only $2.99 per month. It's a joke. So for less than the price of a cup of coffee from Starbucks, you'll have up-to-date, cutting-edge financial information, economic information, geopolitical, geostrategic information that's put out there. I got some amazing guys that work with me, and we put out a very good, high-quality product. I also offer services. The newest one I just launched with one of the former Wall Street insiders is basically getting your credit completely wiped clean and fixed. So that's a pretty attractive offer, especially that this is the last year people will be available to do that. I'm also available for consulting. My email is guerrillaeconomist@gmail.com.
And folks, I can tell you that this man, you hear a lot of financial guys. You hear, I don't know, you want to talk about all the stuff that's on television, but this is a man, I will tell you, this is a man who knows what he's talking about. And on my website we don't give commercials. I'm an author by trade. I don't take advertising. I am telling you, if you have questions, call him. If you have money that you need to do something with, you're welcome. You're welcome. And I sincerely mean that. He didn't ask me to do that. I'm just telling you. So V, you don't really hear about you very much. You don't talk about you very much. But the transition from where you were at the Royal Bank of Scotland to what you do now, that is a huge transition. How did you get here? How did you end up being the Guerrilla Economist? That's
a wonderful question. When I left RBS, I left on some pretty insane terms. And what I mean by that is this. I saw the evil that was in the system, and I just could not keep my mouth shut. And when you can't keep your mouth shut and you're a rising star, so to speak, there are individuals that want to shoot you down. I was actually trumped out of the bank on fraudulent charges, things that never, really happened. And that showed me how desperate these individuals are. I've had enough to go after them in a court case, but going against a major investment bank, they'll have the case spinning in a courtroom for decades, and see who runs out of money, you or the bank, and it'll typically be you. So that after I left that, I became so disenchanted, so disheartened by the system, and I've had my desert experience, my wilderness experience, so to speak, where for a few years, I said, God, what is my purpose? What am I doing out here? Where do I go? What do I do, Lord? And by a miraculous act, one by one, I've had different contracts come my way that allowed me to work in different aspects of the financial system where I learned a little bit more here and learned a little bit more there. And then eventually, by an act of God, with the Euro crisis that was going on, I shot an email over to Steve and said, hey, Steve, there's a lot of misinformation out there. With the Euro crisis, let me show you what's happening. Here's from the horse's mouth from somebody who's worked in the theater. And sure enough, some of the things that I put forth came to fruition the following week. And that created a clamoring for more and more of these V alerts. And eventually those alerts started building in fervor to the point where Steve's like, hey, you want to come on the radio with me? And January the 11th of 2013 was the first radio show I did on the Hagman and Hagman Report. And as soon as I came on, within 3 weeks, everything I said became headline news. So, since then, I've had, just an amazing time, and God has been good. And, the best thing that I love is that I'm working outside of the system. I'm being effectively used by the kingdom of God, and I'm able to contribute and give back to the kingdom of God and for the furtherance of the kingdom of God, and that's the most important thing. And I'll tell you right now, I have a holy hatred for the system. I don't hate any individuals that I've worked with or that are in the system now, but the system has to go. It has to be done. It has to be done away with because I know the evil of it. It's a maniacal system, and it's only going to get worse unless the Lord intervenes or some drastic change is done by people standing up and saying, no, that's enough, no more.
Well, we talk about we talk about the evil that has befallen the earth. I've written a couple of books. The first book, 3 Days in the Belly of the Beast, and the second book was As the Darkness Falls. And I use that phrase often, that darkness is falling on the face of the earth. And, the thing is, the banking industry, not individuals, although I'm sure there are individuals that are evil, but the banking industry is inherently evil.
Yes.
It is based on greed and lust. And speaking as one who had been in the industry and participated, with that kind of thing, I can tell you that, there are often times as a believer that I'd get off the phone with a banker and I just have to take a shower. I felt dirty.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worse than a used car salesman.
I am telling you. The interesting thing is, after I left the industry, I try to get a couple really big deals. And folks, people that know money, when we talk about money, he's from money or that's real money, they're not talking about millions or even tens of millions or even hundreds. They talk about hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. He'll tell you. So we were trying to get a couple of deals done, and I will tell you that my experience led right back to London. I mean, if you want to get a deal done, a real deal done, you got to go to London.
Yep.
And the evil that permeates the system is unbelievable. And until
Tremendous.
you see it for yourself, and it's easy to get lost in the greed, is it not? Because there's all kinds of little trinkets and there's all kinds of stuff you could get. But
absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
For anyone who could, I have not seen the movie, but from what I've heard, The Wolf of Wall Street is supposedly a good description of your typical stockbroker. These guys coming in are just basically a bunch of college frat boys. That's how it was. And when I cut my teeth on the whole industry, it was the same thing. It was a very frat boy, college type, athletic locker room type mentality. And we did not care. Money was like a score in a video game. To us, it's just fun. It's just it was a contact sport. People say, why did I get involved in marketing? I said, well, I love it because it was the closest thing to being a contact sport, and it really is. And but when you start climbing the ladder, then you start seriously saying, wait a minute, this is not about client funds, and this is about something deeper. And the light bulb for me went off when I think it was back in 2003 or 2004. I was actually walking the corridors of an investment firm. And it was a major brokerage house, and I saw the room to the conference. The conference room was open, the door. I saw the board members that were in there, the CEOs, the CFOs, the chair, and they're all holding hands and they're chanting Kabbalistic type prayers with a red triangle on the table. And and the energy, the darkness you could feel walking by that, it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And I had the most sickening feeling in my stomach. I wanted to vomit. And I'm like, oh, my God, what the heck is going on? And, folks, I'm going to tell you right now, every single investment house in right here in Wall Street has a similar setup. If you want to go for management training in Citigroup, one of the things they teach you is Kabbalah and meditation, believe it or not. And then if you're proficient in that, then they bring you into the much higher and higher levels where things get downright satanic.
Well, so, I mean, that really just goes to show you that the system, give me that quote again, the quote on your Rogue Money site. What's the quote again?
Sure. Banking was conceived in iniquity and born in sin.
Conceived in iniquity and born in sin. The system is designed. So would you say, we have about a minute and a half before break, would you say that you always hear that the New World Order or the Illuminati is behind the world banking system. Would you concur with that? Would you agree with that?
There's no doubt. I mean, if you want to call them the Illuminists, the Luciferians, the Bilderbergers, Trilaterals, Club of Rome, whatever the label you want to attach to these guys, but I will tell you it is a select group of individuals that are definitely on the top of this pyramid, and they are the ones pulling the strings. There's no doubt about it. It is a select few banking families that run it, that have the power over it. The power hub and center of this all activity is in London, in the place called the City, which is their equivalent of Wall Street. And there is a conglomerate, and the Dutch are involved in it as well. People don't want to talk about the Dutch, but they're heavy in on it as well. But the nexus of this entire Western banking system centers around London.
That's absolutely right, as well as, well, there are other discussions, audience, you heard me have, those that remember I had Pastor Doug Riggs on, and we talked about the evilness that is kind of drawn to that country and that city in particular. But we will get back to more of that after the break. We are talking with V, the Guerrilla Economist. You are listening to The Cutting Edge, and I am your host, Daniel Holdings, where we are splitting darkness from light. We will return right after this message. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Is it possible that a fictional thriller could predict the future? That's exactly what happened with Daniel Holdings' novels 3 Days in the Belly of the Beast and As the Darkness Falls. Mr. Holdings' first novel, 3 Days in the Belly of the Beast, is set to the background of Geneva, Switzerland and the Large Hadron Collider. Upon reading the novel, Torah code expert Barry Rothman of ArtCode.com did a matrix search in the ancient Torah code for 3 Days in the Belly of the Beast, Daniel's name, and the storylines from the book. What he found was simply stunning, stunning, stunning. Miraculously, 4,200 years before its publication, 3 Days in the Belly of the Beast is found in the ancient Torah code. How could Holdings, a fictional writer, seemingly predict the discovery of the God particle in 2012? In addition, brilliant Brazilian physicist Francis de Aquino says that HARP is being used as a time manipulation device. Both of these real-life storylines come straight out of 3 Days in the Belly of the Beast. However, Daniel Holdings wrote about these issues months, in some cases years, before they came to light. With his second book, Daniel continues on this vein with As the Darkness Falls. The storylines in that book appear to have been ripped from today's headlines. Whether it's earth changes, continuing civil unrest, the potential of a collapsing economy, or supernatural events from all over the world that seem to go unnoticed by the population at large, As the Darkness Falls continues to delve into those issues that mainstream media refuses to acknowledge, and readers from all around the world want to hear about. Some call him a modern-day prophet. Others wonder what his sources are within the government. Does he have some inside information? Daniel will tell you he's a simple writer using his God-given gifts. Yet, Watchman Larry Taylor says that in the elements of CERN and the hum of the harp, Daniel Holdings gets supernatural to the core, to the core, to the core. L.A. Marzulli, Watcher's host, researcher, and lecturer, says of Holdings that his insight is critical in understanding the times in which we live. All of Mr. Holdings' books are available through Amazon, both in paper and digital format. Be sure to check out his website, www.danielholdings.com. His books are at a discount there, and he posts regular news articles that are pertinent to the times in which we live. And while you're on the site, make sure you read the excerpt from his latest wildly anticipated sequel, All of These Things. Daniel, an author, researcher, and lecturer, speaks on a variety of subjects whenever invited. You can find Daniel's show, The Cutting Edge, on the Portal Blog Talk Radio channel. Daniel Holdings novels, Cutting Edge Radio, and DanielHoldings.com. More than just entertainment.
Well, audience, we are back. You are listening to The Cutting Edge, where we are splitting darkness from light. I'm your host, Daniel Holdings, with my very special guest, V, the Guerrilla Economist, and we are breaking down all the mystical things of the banking industry and getting down to the heart of the matter. You know, it occurs to me, V, that we are at a precipice. You talked about being at a precipice with the banking industry or the bubble. But it is interesting. This is why I like talking to believers, Christians that have been in the financial industry, because it is interesting to me how the banking collapse is another one of those things that are just bringing history to a culmination. So we always hear you talk about the banking industry, but what else is on your radar aside from the financial collapse? What else are you watching? What is really bothering you right now?
Well, one of the things is, what I've learned, and, one of the things that I didn't mention, a few people know this, but I was also a contributor to a major think tank. So, geostrategically, I look at a lot of things. I have to look at a lot of countries to see what they're doing, what they're up to, what their chess pieces look like. And the thing that concerns me the most is this. When you have, and economics is always is the driver, and that driver could wind up having what's called an acute reaction, so to speak. When things go wrong economically, that tends to pour into other things. And the thing that gets me very concerned for 2014 and going into 2015 is the chance for a major regional conflict that can spill over to a multinational war. That probability grows by the month. And that's the one thing that I'm concerned about the most. Especially geostrategically speaking and militarily speaking, we've been stretched too thin. We all know what Barry Soetoro has been doing with our military commandership. He's gutted over 200 top-level commanders from our military, particularly in the nuclear response sector. So we're very vulnerable. The Chinese and the Russians continue to not only make advances in technology militarily, but they seem to be testing defenses. One of the things that I've talked about, and I've been screaming at it since September, is that we should have been in an economic collapse back then because of the Syrian false flag that never went to fruition. That was the supposed gas attack by Al-Qaeda. And if your listeners don't know already, Al-Qaeda is a CIA Western-backed asset. That's all it is. There's no such thing as Al-Qaeda. It is a CIA Western-backed intelligence asset. That's all it is. We control it. Okay? I could tell you the banks that helped fund them if I wanted to. But apart from that, when that false flag attack couldn't be pinned on Assad, then at that point we knew that they had to backpedal. So then the next thing that happened is that we were sent packing from Syria. The Russians and the Chinese told us to go take a hike, and for the first time in history, the United States put its tail between its legs and walked away. I mean, when did you ever see that happen? Never. And I believe, from what my sources have told me, is that the Russians and the Chinese, especially the Chinese, threatened to dump the T-bonds, the Treasury bonds that they were holding. They were holding about $2 trillion worth of T-bonds that they threatened to dump on the market, instantly vaporizing the dollar worldwide. And that sent us packing. So this tension hasn't let up. You see what's going on with China and Japan right now with the Senkaku Islands. That's really starting to heat up, and also what China's doing in the Philippines with some islands off the coast of Philippines that the Filipino government had in possession since World War II. So the Chinese have been doing a lot of island hopping for resources, and they're beginning to flex their regional muscle in that area. And it is going to create conflict between them and us because, unfortunately, we have these ridiculous alliances and these treaties signed with these nations like Japan, as if there's an attack on Japan is equivalent to an attack on the United States and would require a response from the United States. So that, coupled with the fact that most of these crazy lunatics that are in power in our country feel that a great way to stimulate the economy or get the kind of change that they've been looking for is to have a nice big war. And that's why about 6 to 8 months ago, you had the Rand Corporation come out with their white paper saying that it's beneficial, economically speaking, to start World War III. So you can imagine the insanity of these people. So that's what's on my radar going into 2014. I'm watching very carefully where these chess pieces are being moved. I mean, it was scary, folks. I mean, let's be honest. Back in September, you had an armada of American and Russian warships in the Mediterranean, an armada. So it was getting serious. It really was.
Well, it's very astute of you. These things are cyclical over history. If you when you trace the effect of money, or the backdrop of money against World War II, against World War I, Korean War, et cetera, you can see how money has influenced all of those conflicts. So, and I don't say that lightly, audience, because we are in the place right now that something has to happen. I mean, things cannot stay the way this idea of the status quo with the dollar. It can't stay this way, can it?
No, and in fact, it's ending. And I want your listeners to know this. I mentioned that terminology, reserve currency, and what that simply means is the way it works is this. Let's just say Daniel is one country and I'm another country. I want to sell Daniel oil. So before I do that, I got to take my currency, which are called the V dollars or V bucks, and exchange my V bucks for American dollars, because oil is only traded in dollars. So when I'm exchanging my V bucks for dollars, I got to pay a transactional fee. Okay, and then I take the dollars and I buy, the oil from Daniel, and I pay him in V-Bucks. And that's the way it works. And he's got to take the V-Bucks and either reinvest it back in the American market, or he holds it as U.S. Treasury, or he's got to convert it back to his currency, which, again, there's a transactional fee. So America had the luxury for the longest time of being the world reserve currency, and we greatly profiteered off of it because we had, quote-unquote, confidence. Now, that confidence is ending, because the rest of the world has caught on to the fact that the United States spends money like a drunken sailor on shore leave. And they're saying to themselves, we have no part with you. And as I'm talking to you and the audience is listening, over 60% of the largest economies in the world have already set up currency swaps amongst themselves, bypassing the dollar. What does that mean? Simple. Instead of using his V-Bucks to buy dollars, V's going to give Daniel V-Bucks and buy oil in V-Bucks, and I get to keep my profit, and I don't have to pay no fees. That's what the world is doing. And in fact, the largest currency exchange in the world, which is called Forex, one of the heads of Forex about a month ago came forward and said, speaking about the European and Chinese swaps, the euro to yuan swap that they've set up, that this is a great thing. This is wonderful. Now the Chinese and the Europeans could do trade bypassing the volatile dollar. And I was floored. When was the last time you had a high-ranking official using the word volatility and pegging it to the dollar? Never. Because as I said earlier in the broadcast, we used to say the dollar is as good as gold.
Well, when they make a statement like that, something, audience, that you need to understand is that financial ministers and the heads of the financial heads of countries choose their words very carefully. They just don't speak off the top of their head, especially the Chinese. So when something is being said, because you will notice whenever the head of the Federal Reserve would come before Congress, he would take, however his testimony would take, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, to say one thing that the markets would catch on. But what he said was very scripted, and it was said very carefully, and it was designed to warm up Congress and the rest of the country, because they knew they would light off of that, what he was saying. So when you have a high-ranking official saying what he said about the developments between the euro and the Chinese currency, this was very, very substantial, and it was strategic, was it not?
Totally strategic. I mean, the Chinese have set up swaps with the Europeans. The Germans have set up swaps with the Russians. The Russians have set up swaps with the Chinese. The Chinese have set up swaps with the Australians. I mean, the whole world. The Canadians have done the same thing. Everybody has set up swaps already between themselves and their trading partners, bypassing the dollar. And also another thing that ends the dollar hegemony, I told you earlier, that the dollar is, that the oil is sold and traded in dollars, well, that's about to end too, because Russia, the largest oil producer in the world that has about 8 times more oil there than Saudi Arabia, has decided to sell the oil directly to China. In other words, China has set themselves up to be a wholesaler. Okay, so the Russians will sell the oil to the Chinese, and the Chinese will sell it to you, and you could buy from them using your own currency. How insane is that? They just killed the dollar, the petrodollar scheme. Folks, this thing's coming apart. It's already done. Picture, if you will, we're the drunken idiot in the corner of a party. Meanwhile, the whole party's gone, and we're still hanging around by the punch bowl. That's what it is. We're oldie news. We are yesterday's news. The paradigm has already shifted. The masses that are in the United States haven't woke up to it. But they will wake up, Daniel. You know when they'll wake up? When they get up in the morning and go to work, and they go fill their gas tank, and all of a sudden they see that guy that comes out that changes the prices every morning, and he puts up a 1 and a 5 and a period and a 0 and a 0. And that's for regular, my friend. $15 a gallon.
Well, the thing is, people think that you're exaggerating, okay? But I want to tell you something. I lived in England back in the 80s. And for an imperial gallon, which is that's a little bit more than our gallon, an imperial gallon is a little bit more than our gallon. But for an imperial gallon back in the 80s, it was $7 a gallon on the economy. Yep. Which at the time would probably equate to about $10 a gallon for us.
Sure.
However, now in today's money, it's a lot more than that. It's probably $15, just like V just said. So the point is that he is not exaggerating. And audience, this show is designed to wake you up to the fact that we are there. The moves that the countries, the players, if you will, are making now are to shield them from the collapse, the full collapse of the dollar. Because when the bottom drops out, V, and we are scratching our head going, I don't understand how this happened. They are still conducting business, are they not? They're moving on, and we're left in the dust.
Oh yeah, we're left in the dust because here's the thing: if you folks remember back to 2008 when Hank Paulson said the sky's falling and there's going to be martial law unless we pass the bailouts and the TARP, and we started bailing all these banks that should have went bust to begin with. We started bailing out all these jokers. What we did was we made the dollar the most toxic asset in the world. So what was once a systemic, what could have been just a systemic problem in just one part of the system, which was the subprime mortgage issue, now became a festering mess, a cancer that's now run its course throughout the entire system. And in effect, the very thing that was used to purge the cancer out winds up becoming the cancer itself, and that's the dollar. So nobody wants to hold the dollar because everybody understands, they see the handwriting on the wall, is a ticking time bomb. So everyone is ditching the dollar. And the worst part is, folks, okay, these crazy social engineers sold you on the idea about 40 years ago that we're a service-based economy and decided to hack every manufacturing job in America and ship it overseas. Well, look at us today. We don't have any assets. Apart from a few oil spots that we have in the Bakken Valley and under the Colorado Rockies, we have nothing. So when all of our debt collectors say, okay, you owe us X amount of money, what are you going to give us in return? What's the collateral? You're going to wake up to the reality that you're going to have a lot of your land, your more homes, your mortgages being pledged as collateral for foreign creditors. It's bound to happen. It's going to happen. It's what happened in Greece. Folks, what do you think happened when Greece went bust? They had a fire sale. On what? Infrastructure, utility companies, land, islands. Anything that wasn't stapled down or nailed down was taken. Same thing's is going to happen here.
Well, and audience, to that point, if you think that they're not going to do that to my land, I have guns, right? I'm going to fight them back. This is how. If you if you wonder how a war could start on our own shores, this is exactly how a war will start on our own shores. And I say that in the practical sense, meaning that there is a threat, a foreign threat, because of the debt that we owe. But at the same time, there are tons of people that have had visions and dreams about this very same thing. Dumitru Duduman dreamt that, or had a vision that there would be nuclear bombs raining down on the United States. And you wonder how that could happen? This is how that could happen. You hear Steve Quayle talk about foreign troops on our soil. How in the heck would our own government let that happen? How could they let foreign troops? We're a sovereign nation. That's how that could happen, because I think it was Rush Limbaugh, love him or hate him, he said, follow the money. Follow the money. This is all about money, people. These people that are in charge, what they hope to be is the leader of some other country or some other entity and save their own necks. It's not about patriotism on their part. It's not about the the red, white, and blue old glory. It's not about that. It's about money and power. And when the Bible says that the love of money, it doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. These people of power, they love money, and you wonder how we found ourselves in the middle of this. So, but before we get too far down the road here, there are some things that I need you to clear up for the audience. You use the phrase, this word, and people hear this word a lot, hedge money. Okay, what does hedge money mean?
Hedge money is total overarching control. That's what hedge money is. Picture, if you will, picture, if you will, I'm walking down the street with a giant umbrella, and all these people are underneath me. That's hedge money. It's covering. It's overarching power. That's total control. That's hedge money.
Okay, and that's closely related to the word oligarchy. What does oligarchy mean?
Oligarchy means rule by few. That means there's a select cabal, a group of individuals, a oligarch, who decide, and they get together and they decide what's best for you and I.
Okay, so, and what is, we hear this phrase all the time, what are derivatives? I mean, this is where people's eyes glass over. Well, I don't know what that means.
That's great.
Okay. What are derivatives?
Derivatives are what I think it was Warren Buffett. I don't like the guy personally, but he coined the term. They're weapons of mass financial destruction. He's absolutely right. What a derivative is basically any, and I'm going to make it as simple as possible. I want you to imagine it's a bet based on just about anything. Let's just say, Daniel in his office, he's sitting right now, he has a Pilot G2 pen. It happens to be one of my favorite pens. I love it. And Daniel says, hey, V, this pen is worth $1. And I look at Daniel and say, hey, that pen's not worth $1. It's worth $10. And then somebody else comes forward and says, no, it's worth $50. And I said, no, it's not worth $50. It's worth $1,000. And now we've over-leveraged a $2 pen into worth $1,000. But in reality, there's nothing backing that up. It's just conjecture. It's just a guesstimate. And that's basically what a derivative is in the most simplest of terms. It is a bet based basically on anything. And that's what Wall Street did. They placed bets on certain stocks that should be worth X amount of money in certain equity positions, and they placed bets that it would lose X amount of money on certain, and also on certain positions. So that's what basically a derivative is. And now we have a massive amount of derivative debt globally, anywhere between 600 trillion to 1.5 quadrillion. That's the total derivative debt.
Mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. And I want to say this to the people. Oftentimes you hear a lot of financial pundits talk about millions, billions, and trillions, and people don't seem to understand this. So I'm going to make it real simple for y'all. Here we go. How many days is 1 million seconds? A million seconds is 12 days. Okay? How many or how much time is a billion seconds? And the answer is a billion seconds is 32 years. Wow. Now, do you see the difference between million and billion. It's huge. Now, how much is a trillion seconds? 300 years. Think about that, folks. Now, the United States debt, when you count our entitlement programs, is $67 trillion. When you add our derivative debt, it's close to $400 trillion.
It's unbelievable. People do not understand the fix that we're in, and the only way they can fix this is the bottom line. The only way they can fix this, V, is with the reset. Is that right? They got to reset because it's never going to get paid, so it's got to be a reset. So what's the reset?
Right. Well, here's the funny thing. I'm going to give you a couple examples of resets here. Resets never work out to the average person in the street. It doesn't work out in their favor. It only works out for the oligarchs and those that are on top. At the end of World War II, we went into Germany, the boys from Chicago. The boys from Chicago are basically a bunch of economists. And they studied the absolute rubble that the German economy was in, and they tried to figure out ways to rebuild it.
Mm-hmm.
And during the reign of Hitler instituted a new currency called the Reichsmark. And at the end of World War II, when Germany was defeated, the economists that were from Chicago said, "Hey, the Reichsmark is no good. It's highly inflated. Let's just cancel the currency." So they reset the currency and brought out the Deutschmark. And everybody got 50 Deutschmarks, which is probably equivalent to about $1,500 or so. So if you're a homeless bum on the street, man, you were happy because now you got 50 Deutschmarks. You took your card, you went to the bank, and you got your 50 Deutschmarks. You're a happy little clam. If you're a billionaire in Germany, and all of a sudden your Reichsmarks were gone, and you got or I wouldn't even say a billionaire, but say a millionaire, right, or somebody who's fairly wealthy, upper middle class, you got 50 Deutschmarks. So your wealth is gone. It's wiped out. It's been reset. Now you got 50 Deutschmarks. You go to the bank, you give them the card, they give you 50 Deutschmarks of the new currency that's been reset, and then you leave the bank, go to the gun store, buy yourself a pistol, and put it to your head. And that's exactly what the rich and the wealthy and those who were still had their wealth in Germany did. They ended their lives. They killed themselves because their wealth was gone. So in a reset, and again, you got to take into account a couple of these things. Number one, the dollar is the world reserve currency, and it's also the most toxic asset in the world, okay, because of the simple fact that it's traded everywhere. So in order to reset the dollar, we're looking at not a 40 or 50% devaluation. I personally strongly feel it could be as high as a 60 to 70% of the value of the dollar being wiped out instantly. So what does that do with the average American who's got his money in a savings account or retirement account or a 401k or a stock or a pension? It's gone. Your value of everything you have is gone. And what happens next? You become a slave, and all the things you own gets bought up on pennies on the dollar. That's what typically happens on a reset.
Well, the Bible talks about that in the last days that a loaf of bread will cost you a wheelbarrow of money.
Yep.
And you wonder how that could happen. But you say up to 65%. I would bet that it would be devaluation of up to 80% on the dollar.
Absolutely.
And I'm not
absolutely.
It is mind-boggling.
Absolutely. Now, I'm being very conservative when I say 60 to 70%. Now, that's on the conservative end. It could be at 80. It could even be 90%. Because the problem with the money supply is there's just so much out there. And what's not being there's also a percentage that's not being totally reported. So it's going to be pretty interesting how things play out. And just as the homeless bum was happy because he got 50 Deutschmarks, the third world and the emerging markets, they're going to be happy because all of a sudden their depreciated currency gets reset higher based upon assets. And we have no assets.
Audience, I want you to understand something, okay? This reset will not be like any reset in all of human history because this reset comes at the end of the age. So
right.
the programs and the systems that will be put in place in response to the collapse of the dollar are the last currencies, and they are the last governments. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. But before we go there, do me a favor and give out your website information again.
Sure. The website is roguemoney.net. And if you want to contact me for if you need consulting, you need help, you can contact me at Guerrilla Economist. That's Guerrilla Economist, all one word, at gmail.com.
You are listening to The Cutting Edge. I'm your host, Daniel Holdings, where we are splitting darkness from light. My very special guest this evening, V, the Guerrilla Economist, and we are breaking down the Babylonian financial system this side of the veil. Some very important information has already come out. V has enlightened us to some of the basic terms of where we have been, and we have about a half hour, 20 minutes left in the show, so we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty now that is so important for where we are. Now, V, when we talked about that 50 Deutschmarks that the bum got, right? I hear you talk about gold all the time, and this is what I hear the frustration in your voice when you're on with the Hagmans or you're on with Steve. You get questions like, "Well, what should I buy in my 401k?" You don't get it, right? So we're not going to give you questions like that. But I want you to talk to me about what real money is. What is real currency? What is real money? For the sake of the people, tell them what they need.
Sure. Well, currency is basically somebody else's debt that you're holding. Okay? That's how they get you. You're holding somebody else's debt. It doesn't belong to you in the first place. You're basically trading somebody else's debt, somebody else's IOU notes. That's all you're doing. Okay? Real money is a real hard asset. And for the last 5,000 to 6,000 years of human economic activity, real money has always been gold and has always been silver. Okay, always, all the time, every single time. Now, in different places, there are certain cultures that use copper, they use tin, but at the end of the day, it's all about real hard assets and always comes back to gold and silver. That's what real money is. The smart individuals today, especially in the East, are buying up gold and silver and even platinum at a ravenous rate, okay, because they understand what's coming down the pike. They understand that the dollar's days are due.
Hold on a second. No, that can't be right because gold lost money last year. I saw the graph. That's not right.
Great. I'm glad you brought that up. Folks, what's going on in the papers market? Basically, the price of gold that you see traded day in and day out is a manipulated price. And I'm going to name for you some of the manipulators. And one is J.P. Morgan, the other is the Federal Reserve, and the other perpetrator is Goldman Sachs. And then to a greater and lesser extent, you have the European banks involved as well, Deutsche Bank being one of them. Okay? So let me tell you, then you might ask yourself, well, why do these people want to suppress the price of gold? Well, I'll tell you right now. If you are a central banker and you want any sort of monetary credibility, you cannot allow high gold prices, because high gold prices makes your currency look worthless. And remember what we touched upon earlier. This is a confidence game. If gold is up really high, guess what? People are not confident in the dollar. So in order to keep the illusion of confidence going, they go ahead and they suppress the price of gold. Now you might ask yourself, well, how the heck do they suppress the price of gold? Suppress it. Well, it's simple. What J.P. Morgan does, let's say this. They take out, let's say in their vaults, they have, 1,000 ounces of gold. Okay? I mean, you're using small numbers so we can all understand it. Let's say they have 1,000 ounces of gold. And then J.P. Morgan wants to sell their gold on the market. But they'll sell contracts, not the actual physical gold, but they'll sell contracts. And J.P. Morgan goes to the market and says, hey, I have X amount of gold. Do you want some? And the person's like, sure. And JP's like, well, for safekeeping, we'll just keep it in my vault, but here's the contract. You have full ownership to it. And you're thinking, oh, man, this is a great deal. I get to, have ownership because of this piece of paper I'm holding in my hand, and JP Morgan keeps it in the vault. Everything's good, right? So you decide to take this contract. And next thing you know, JP Morgan has put out 100,000 ounces of gold on contract. But the problem is they only have 1,000 ounces of gold. And so in order to suppress it, what do? They just decide to buy back some of those contracts and dump it on the marketplace to keep the price low. And that's the game they're playing.
The actual cost of gold, if you say to somebody, if you go to buy gold and you buy it from a dealer. By the way, folks, this is not a plug. He didn't ask me to say this, but Steve Quayle sells gold. He sells commodities. I suggest you call him. You want somebody to trust, call him. He didn't ask me to do that. He didn't know I was going to do that. I don't know what his number is. Look on his website. He does Quayle's Precious Metals or something like that. You can trust him. So call him.
Renaissance. And the thing is, folks, that's who I use for my own personal metals and as well as for my clients because Steve is quick. I put an order in today. It's in my living room tomorrow. That's how fast Steve is, and I love the fact that he's a believer.
That you don't. If you call somebody and they say, well, look, I don't even know what's the price of gold today. Do you know?
Oh, I totally spaced. I think it was like what?
I don't know, but let's say that they say $1,800 an ounce. I don't know, but let's just say it's not. But let's just say it's $1,800 an ounce, right? And you say, well, wait a minute. I just saw the chart. I just saw the index, and that the index is like 15 something. Why are you charging me $1,800? And you think you're getting gouged? That's the price. The real price of gold is what you can get it for. Is that right, V? I mean, it's not what the chart
absolutely.
says. It's what the dealers are giving it at.
Absolutely. That's called the acquisition premium. Because look, these banksters want you folks to think that economy is run on supply and demand, and it is for the most part, except for when it comes to precious metals, because there's no supply left, very little supply left, incredibly high demand, and yet for some reason the price is around $1,200 per ounce or so. I mean, think about the insanity, folks. It costs a mining company almost $1,500 per ounce to bring gold out of the ground. Why the heck is it going for around $1,200 and change? I mean, it's unbelievable. It just should not be that way. That's because of the suppression. Now, I got some good news for you folks. Number one, J.P. Morgan is getting out of the commodities business. In fact, their headquarters right here in New York, where their vault is located, where they house all the silver and some of the gold, they're sold out off to the Chinese. Okay, Deutsche Bank is getting out of the commodities business. All right, and more of these banks who were playing the game of suppression are getting out because they can no longer cover their shorts because of the simple fact that the demand for the metal is far outpacing supply. And that's the problem we're running into.
V, you say that's good news. I happen to think that's bad news because that means that the game's almost over. The jig is almost up, but they don't want to do nothing with it when they're moving on to something else.
Right.
Folks, listen. If you and you don't ever hear me. There are a couple of things I don't talk about on this show. I talk mostly about spiritual things and some crazy stuff. It's kind of what the show's about, right? But when we talk about practicality stuff, things that are practical, okay. I don't normally talk about politics. I don't normally talk about money, okay. But we're talking about money. So, folks, time is very, very short, right? And if you have to ask V the question, well, what stock should I buy for my 401k? You're not getting it, okay? Go out and buy some gold. Have it in your hand, right? Or some silver. So V, we got about 20 minutes left. Let me shoot some things off to you here. See, and just really quick answer. If you like it, you don't like it, okay? You like gold.
Sure. Love it.
You like silver.
Love it.
You love silver. Why do you love silver?
Well, silver is the poor man's gold. I mean, it's something that the most downtrodden of us could possibly, if you save enough, could actually afford. I mean, $18 to $20 an ounce for an ounce of silver is achievable for most people. Number one. Number two, it has a tremendous upside. Unlike gold, it's not, you
talk about manipulation of the market. The price of silver has been so suppressed. There's a huge upside to silver.
Tremendous.
So, okay.
Silver should be right now around $500 an ounce.
Absolutely.
Easy. Gold should be over $5,000 to $7,000 an ounce, and I'm even thinking it should be anywhere between $10,000 to $11,000.
That's right, and silver's cheap. I mean, you could go out and buy silver a day. With if you have trouble making ends meet, and you could go out and buy a little bit of silver, and you'd be good when things happen.
Yep.
So okay, what about platinum? You like platinum?
Love platinum. Tremendous upside.
Okay, copper?
Yeah, I don't mess with base metals too much.
Okay.
I mean, it's good to have it as base metal if you want to sell it off to a junkyard in a collapse. It's good to have. It's a raw, hard asset. It's not something I would stock because of portability reasons. Things get heavy, and in order for you to lug around copper in order to sell it, it gets kind of cumbersome.
Okay, diamonds.
No, thank you. Diamonds are a joke. The diamond industry, in and of itself, is something that is basically created via fraud. What I mean by that is this: what is a diamond? It's carbon. Okay, you can take a stick of peanut butter, put it in there are labs you can take it to where they can compress it under great heat and pressure and create a diamond for you. So diamonds are only there because De Beers controls the absolute supply, and if tomorrow De Beers opens up their vault, diamonds will be worth less than broken glass.
Okay, now switching gears, in a financial collapse, some things I always hear people say this to me. Well, I go out and buy cigarettes or alcohol, and I can always trade those. Is that a true statement?
Repeat that question. You got cut off.
Well,
in a collapse, people buy cigarettes.
After a collapse, if I have some cigarettes or alcohol, I could always trade those for something I need. Is that true?
Absolutely true. I'll give you a perfect example. When the Russian economy collapsed in early 1990, 91, in order to get anything done, I mean, you had a bottle of Jack Daniels. That got you places, my friend.
Well, look, the Dow Jones hit record highs tomorrow. I'm going out and I'm going to buy the Spider, right, for the Dow Jones. I forget what it is. But is that a good buy? No.
Because the markets are completely overvalued. The Dow is overvalued by 67% thanks to the Fed's manipulation. The entire market is rigged. It's fake. There's no real money in it. There's no volume in the market. And that's the problem.
Okay. Now, look, I'm going to go out and buy a house. I mean, I think interest rates are relatively cheap right now. I hear that they're going to go up, so I'm going to buy a house right now. Is that a good buy?
Absolutely not, unless you want to be, you want some Chinese foreigners to come over and oust you from your home at gunpoint. Go right ahead.
This is an aside. I saw a video, and I was going to post it. I didn't get around to post it on my website. But there was a video where InfoWars, one of the guys from InfoWars, went out and he went to a pier in California, and he was trying to get people to sign a petition to
have troops quartered in their homes. Yep, that was Mark Dice.
For our troops. People, knowledge is power. Okay, if you don't know what the Third Amendment is and you don't know what it took to even get the Third Amendment, then you're going to sign that stuff just because you want to look smart. That's what this is about. Okay, you have to be thinking during this time because what is about to happen. Guys, you listen, you got to pull your heads out of the sand. I was going to say something else, but I won't. You got to pull your heads out of the sand, and you got to look at the truth around you, okay? Being in the dark at this time in history will literally kill you. It is very, very important that you take the things that V is telling you today, take them to heart, and more importantly, act on them. This show is not for entertainment. It's not even necessary for your education. It's like a big neon arrow pointing you in a direction saying, go! Because time is very, very short. Speaking of short time, we have about 15 minutes. There are a couple things that I want to go over with you about where we are. You made some predictions about Japan and what is going on with Japan and the economy. I've heard it said that as Japan goes, so does the United States. So what's the latest on Japan, and what can we see coming in the very near future?
I mean, Japan, every night, they're on the verge of collapse. Every night. Look, folks, Japan is the second biggest bond market in the world. And people always hear the word stocks and bonds. Well, let me tell you this. Bond markets are usually 2 times bigger than a stock market. They're twice as big. Okay? So Japan is the second largest bond market in the world. They hold a considerable amount of U.S. debt. If Japan goes belly under or belly up, we go belly up with them. And it's so bad over there that one of these guys that I know, who's a correspondent to one of the biggest financial houses in Tokyo, has went on the record and said that things are so bad that they don't even need a stock market collapse, that the bond market could implode at any moment. And that's why the government of Japan is doing whatever they can to distract the population, even dragging them into a war with China.
All right. So, something I haven't heard you talk about when it comes to Japan, how does Fukushima play into their economy and what's going on with their markets right now? Is there any correlation? Is there any effect?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I was actually on a Canadian radio show this morning, and that was the question that was thrown my way. The answer is things in Japan are so crazy. Folks, Japanese used to be a very industrious people. Now you have a young generation in Japan that are absolutely lazy, do nothing else. They do nothing at all. They just sit around. They're lazy. They don't do much. There is a great feeling of helplessness and apathy amongst many of the Japanese. Those that are vibrant and have their eyes filled with life are very concerned for their country. And many Japanese have told me, V, I feel like my nation is committing suicide. Harikari is what they call it, where they disembowel themselves with a knife. And that's what the samurai used to do. And I think that's what Japan is doing. I look at it as a country that is committing suicide on itself. Fukushima is not only affecting the environment, it's affecting a lot of the economy there as well, because there are many corporations that are leery of investing in Japan with headquarters or research facilities or any sort of infrastructure, because they know the dangers of the radiation that are coming off of there. It is a serious, serious situation. And every country that has asked to help Japan has unequivocally said no. I just don't understand it, Daniel. I really don't get it. And I truly believe we are witnessing a whole race of people committing suicide.
Without sounding too spiritual, I think it is a spiritual dimension to Japan. I remember Henry Groover went and he prayed through the islands, and some positive things really happened. But overall, I think there is a spiritual dimension to Japan and what's going on there, both with their economy and their environment that has them by the throat. And I think you're correct. I think we're seeing the demise of Japan right before our eyes, and it's a slow death. It's not a quick one. It's a slow one. Okay, 11 minutes here. What's going on with the euro? Where does the EEC stand right now, and what can we see for 2014 for them?
Well, the euro is for all intents and purposes, it is a unofficially collapsed currency. It's a dead currency. It will continue until in its current state until there's a reset. And the thing with the euro is all the systemic problems in the eurozone never went away. They've gotten systemically worse. And not only have they gotten systemically worse, it's really causing austerity to come down on not just the pigs, which are Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, but it's also starting to affect France. You see Francois Hollande, the crazy socialist communist, not only deciding to hit everybody making €1 million or more with a 75% income tax, but now he's doing all sorts of things where a company has to hire X amount of individuals no matter what. These crazy policies are strangling the heck out of the euro. And you're going to see this continue because the Eurozone and all the bureaucrats there are just like the bureaucrats in America. They don't create anything. They're not job creators. They don't know how to run a company. These guys couldn't run a lemonade stand, but yet they're creating economic policy. And the Eurozone is dead. You're going to see the life squeezed out of the euro, and that's why the strongest economy in the Eurozone, which is Germany, is doing everything it can to warm up to the Russians. They're even going out building rail lines that are connecting Moscow to Berlin for the exchange of goods and services and natural gas, and they're doing anything they can right now to distance themselves from the European economic community. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how the Eurozone plays out. Same thing with Italy.
Okay, so very quickly, we got about 8.5 minutes here. Very quickly, what is BRICS, and should we be concerned about it?
Oh, yeah, BRICS is the spelling of doom, D-O-O-M, for America and the petrodollar. The BRICS, about a year or so ago, put together the framework for the BRICS Bank. And the BRICS Bank and the initiative behind the BRICS Bank is a counterbalance to the IMF. Earlier in the program, I told you folks that, the Russians and the Chinese told the Americans to go packing from Syria, and we packed up and we left. And that set a precedent to many nations around the world, that if you're being bullied by the Americans, just cozy up to the Russians and the Chinese because they will protect you. And that's the message that has been widely received. Hence now Iran is free to sell their oil. Okay? So they're good to go. Now the BRICS are a counterbalance to the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, which is an international body which is heavily valued in dollars, okay, heavily denominated in dollars. They use the dollar as their primary currency for loans. So the IMF, so the BRICS Bank is going to do the same thing. They're going to be loaning, but guess what they're going to be using as collateral, folks? Gold. And that's why the Indians and the Chinese and the Russians have been buying gold like there is no tomorrow. And the scheme with the BRICS Bank is to set up what's called a gold-backed trade notes, where if you are one country and I'm another country and I want to trade, instead of using a currency swap, we'll just use a gold-backed trade note in order to acquire oil or other types of resources like timber or whatever we need. So this is, again...
Do you think that's going to be the one world currency?
No, I don't think that's going to be the one world currency. These are just the moves that are in play. So we're seeing right now, Daniel, a complete power struggle with the East, headed by the Russians and the Chinese and the BRICS, and their whole gold-backed trade note system, which is great, by the way. It's absolutely inflation-proof. It's a very good system. Versus the old Anglo-American European power structure. So that's where the battle's going to be, and I think that's where we're headed. There has to be a clash because it's the battle of two philosophies, and I think it's going to be in the middle of this clash that the man of peace will appear.
Biometrics and banking, is it something we should worry about? Is it the mark of the beast system?
Absolutely. I've worked on some of the systems, especially NFC in its infancy stages. NFC, folks, if you don't know what it is, called near field communication. Your iPhone has it, your Samsung Galaxy S3s and S4s have it, and all the newer cell phones have it. What that simply does is you can walk into your Starbucks and pay by phone, just by tapping the phone next to the scanner. It also allows you to will allow you to go ahead and buy that. Your phone becomes like your virtual wallet, so to speak, okay? NFC technology is going to already translate into a microchip, which will be implantable, and we've got that chip down to basically its dust. One of the beta tests that were done were in Japan, where they sprinkled some of this RFID dust on pieces of sushi, and as the person left the building, the restaurant, it told them exactly how much sushi they've eaten and charged them accordingly to their credit card. So it's already there. The system's already there. The fiber optic lines have been all laid. This is all for high speed, high speed networks. That's all been the foundations have already all been built up. So it's
the
there.
reason that the reason that I laughed is because you were quick on the draw when I asked you. You said yes. I didn't expect that. So, we're coming to the end of the show here. So do me a favor, parting shot and your website information again, any other important information that you want to impart to the people in the next minute or so.
Folks, the most important thing I can tell any of you is get the heck out of paper. If you got $100,000 in the bank, you got a considerable amount of money in the bank, get it out. Convert it to gold and silver. Get out of your stock market. If you have a 401k, see what you can do to get out of it. If you want to know what to do with, you got, a good sum of money, you want to know what to do with it, reach out to me at guerrillaeconomist@gmail.com. Buy gold, buy silver, hold on to it, and most of all, you need Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate prep. Without him, you're ready for nothing. And again, the website is roguemoney.net. Thank you.
Thank you so much, V, for being on with us. Folks, that was V, the Guerrilla Economist at roguemoney.net. We are so grateful to him for taking the time. This has been a rundown of the Babylonian financial system this side of the veil. I've been your host, Daniel Holding, on the cutting edge where we are splitting darkness from light. He is so correct. V is so correct in that Jesus is the ultimate prep. Times are so serious right now. We are at the culmination of history, and I told you earlier in the program that this would be the last reset. It will be the last system, and it will be the last government rule on this earth before time comes to an end. We are there, folks. I used the example last week of that commercial with the Geico gecko, and when he looked out of the eye of the Mount Rushmore, and he said, I wonder if you can see Mount Rushmore from here. You can't see it because you were there. There are things that you can do to prepare for that. Get into metals that you can hold, that you can see. Make your heart right with the Lord. Talk to him. This is not a time to be religious. It's not a time to be a traditionalist. You have to be in a relationship with Jesus like he is your groom and we are his bride, because he is coming back for his bride. We're going to have to walk through things before he comes back. But you can walk in the peace that surpasses all understanding. You only get that peace in relationship with Christ, a real relationship with Christ. If you don't know him and you haven't talked to him, or if you're just playing church, sitting your butt on a pew, or paying your tithe and think you're going to squeak by, this is not the time to play. It is really, really important that you focus on him, that you talk to him on a regular basis, and that we are plugged into him like never before. Because, folks, I am telling you, the end of the age is upon us. And it's really, really important that we prepare for the end of the age by preparing our hearts. I've been your host, Daniel Holding. You have been listening to The Cutting Edge. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.